What you are about to hear might just keep you up tonight. Welcome to Hauntcore Vault. I want to tell the story of my sister. She is the reason I am convinced in the paranormal. We'll call her Grace. A few years back, she was attending the 4th grade in Cali. Each and every day she'd walk to the bus stop by herself. That is, until one day she comes home with a slight smile on her face and walks up to my mother. "Mom, do you know a girl named Scotty?" My mother was on the phone, mid-conversation, and her jaw drops, and she becomes silent. She ends the conversation immediately with, "I'll call you back." I'm now going to backtrack. My siblings and I never got to meet our actual grandmother, our mom's mom. She died in 1966 when our mother was 7 years old due to kidney failure. Our mother never really talked to us about her mother. There wasn't much to tell, save for the fact she was horridly bullied at school for not having a mother. Her father would remarry 2 other women, and it was on the last one that the marriage stuck. We'll call her Cindy. Cindy was a witch, and though she didn't want her to be referred to as a mother for her stepdaughter, she wanted me and my siblings to know her as our grandmother, pretty much punishing my grandfather and berating my mother if they ever brought up Grandpa's first wife, our mother's actual mother. So we never got a chance really to know who this woman was, let alone that her nickname, her preferred name when alive, was Scotty. So to have my sister come bounding in asking about this person she didn't even know existed was a shocker. Of course, the usual questions came along about how and why she was asking about Scotty. She sometimes walks me to school, tells my funny stories. She says she misses you and Grandpa a lot. Oh, and Gary is safe. My mother was speechless. She was too young to know about Gary, our uncle who died years before, when we were all so very young. Again, our mother never really spoke much about him, as his sordid past wasn't a subject to be had around little ones. Our mother ended up holding the equivalent of the Spanish Inquisition to finding out who gave her young daughter this kind of information. But everyone was found to be innocent and not said a word to her. Grace would claim to see Scotty a few more times, then the sightings disappeared. That is, until we moved to New Hampshire. Living in a 250-plus-year-old town is guaranteed to have old-timey graveyards, and that is where my sister likes to go. Immediately, she was attracted to graveyards and would spend hours sitting on graves, just staring at the markers. "What do you do there?" I asked. "I like to speak with the people that float around," she replied. "A lot of them are pretty strict, but for the most part, very nice." This would continue on and off for a few years, mostly held in private, as she would sneak out or say she was going to friend's house. The friend's house in question was usually a grave somewhere. I would sometimes tag along so she didn't feel compelled to lose this gift. However, what sealed it for me that there is another side was when my grandfather was in medically induced coma, waiting for the angels to come along and whisk him away. My family was there to say goodbye. It was finally time for Grace to say goodbye to the only grandfather she got to know. She stroked his wispy gray hair and started to speak to him, and then started to mention names of people she was never told about, she claimed were in the room with us. She talked about how Ernie was there, waiting for him with a beer, how his brother Marvin, who died before she was born, couldn't wait to see him again, and the look of sheer surprise on Cindy's face. These were people who had not enough significance to be brought up to be spoken about in our lives, but Grace knew. My mother turned pale. "Oh, and Scotty is waiting for you, Grandpa." Cindy was mortified and stormed out of the room at this point. My sister looks to our mother, a beaming smile on her face, and says,
Grandma Scotty says she'll always love you, Mom. She says you did a good job raising your kids.
My roommate in college and I used to use an Ouija occasionally and had some funny/interesting interactions. For context, our college was in a small town called St. Mary's City, which was the original capital of Maryland from 1630 to 1694. So there's obviously a lot of colonial/early American history to be found there. I never really believed in spirits before college, but some of the messages we got were just so peculiar and unique that I started to believe. I've always been curious to know more mundane things about spirits, the technicalities, and how their afterlives really work. Like, can they watch TV or read newspapers over our shoulders to keep up with history? Are they aware that time is passing? Do they like interacting with the living, or does it take too much energy? That kind of stuff. Once I asked a random spirit we were talking to what they do all day when they're not interacting with the living, and it said, see, which I thought was really interesting. Like, obviously, if it had said watch, that would have been kind of spooky, but see is such an active work to use, and it shows that they're still taking advantage of the senses they do have. Another time we were talking to a female spirit that was giving really succinct answers, like spelling out her full name, Alice Zimmerman, and a range of years when she had lived in the area, 1940 to 1950. Out of curiosity, we looked up the name and years she gave us, and we found out she had been a math professor at the college in the 1940s. Neither myself or my roommate were math majors, and we rarely interacted with the math department, so there was no way we could have known that. The last story I'll share is one people don't often believe, and some people get offended by because they think I'm lying or they don't believe in spirits, but I swear it happened. I am a white female, and my roommate was a Caribbean-American female, so sometimes when we interacted with spirits from earlier eras, we would run into some racism/distrust. Sometimes spirits would only want to interact with her, and sometimes they'd only want to interact with me. This one time we were talking with a female spirit who didn't really respond to me, and when my roommate asked her why, she said, white. My roommate thought this was pretty funny and explained that I was cool and that racial issues had gotten somewhat better in the years since her passing. I mentioned that we had just had a black president. This was like 2017, and I kid you not, this really intense air of excitement filled the room. It kind of reminded me of those viral videos where a kid has just gotten into their dream college and they're jumping up and down because they're so happy. It was that strong. My roommate was like, "You didn't know?" And the spirit responded, "No," before she stopped responding altogether. My roommate joked that maybe she left to tell the others about the president. A few weeks before this interaction, some anthropology students at our school discovered that there had been slave quarters on our campus at one time, sort of near our dorm was. That's one of my favorite Ouija board stories, but I can see how people could be offended by it, and I apologize if I've offended anyone here. That's not my intention.
The first and only time I ever used a Ouija board, I was a teenager playing on it with a friend on my back porch. I didn't know of anyone who had died, really, except I remembered from an old photo on the wall a great-aunt called Nell. The name Nell stuck with me because it was a boy's name. So I try to talk to Great-Aunt Nell, but when I speak, I say, without hesitation or control, Aunt Connie. I thought, that's weird, I don't have an Aunt Connie. I try again and say, I'm trying to speak with, and mentally saying the word Nell, Aunt Connie. It was an involuntary response. Very weird, but we moved on and kept playing. When my mom got home from running errands, she asked how our game was going, And I replied, "It's fine, except I kept trying to talk to Great Aunt Nell, but kept saying Connie, which is so weird because I don't have an Aunt Connie." I still remember my mom's face in that moment. It turns out I did have an Aunt Connie. She was a baby who died of SIDS decades before I was born. My mom almost named me after her. I went on to have extreme paranormal experiences that continue to this day, actually. I think it opened a door that I haven't been able to close. Edit. The scariest things that have ever happened to me were from when I was a moody 15 to 18-year-old girl that seemed to really energize my surroundings, and lots of scary things happened. I saw people, heard my name whispered in my ear at night multiple times, heard footsteps daily, and heard a voice mimic my father's and walk around the kitchen. That one convinced me that we were broken into, and I stayed outside until my boyfriend came to get me. Of course, nobody there. My brother moved back into the family house after college and confirmed he also heard a voice mimic our father's and walk around the kitchen. He didn't offer this info. I had to pull it out of him over dinner years later. We independently experienced this and didn't know it. In college, I saw a girl standing over my roommate's bed in the middle of the night. I woke up the next day and was like, "Hey, who was that?" Roomie was like, "Oh, hell no." She and I still talk about it today. We were on a sorority hall at the time, so I dismissed it initially. It only hit me later that I didn't recognize her or see her legs. The other weirdest thing in college was someone kept getting into bed next to me. Never touched me, but the mattress went down with their weight. That one spooked me.
This was late summer 2011. I am in an EU country, so none of this was in English. I was 15. Me and my friend did it. I drew up the board on a large piece of paper, lit the candles, entered a meditative state. I was the conduit for the experience. We used a small shot glass turned upside down. I don't remember the first question or how my reaction was to when it first moved. We were sitting on the floor in my room with the board on a rectangular subwoofer acting as a small table. We place only the tip of our finger on the glass, resting, his at 12 o'clock and mine at 6. Had one of us moved our fingers to try to influence the glass, it would simply rotate in an awkward way, which we tried after. We asked many questions to the entity, lifting up the glass and whispering into it. Is there someone that wants to communicate with us? Then placing it down again on our designated circle. The glass moved to yes. We asked for a name, and so followed a series of questions and answers. Lars died in 1947. He had no connection to the building. I don't recall if we asked him something more, but after that I said farewell and gave my thanks, as I felt it to be mundane at the time. I then asked this very question, starting with 6 all the way up to 9. When I reached 9, it moved to no instead of the previous yes. So we settled for 8. Is there someone from the 8th dimension that we can communicate with? Yes. What's your name? O-N-K. How old are you? It then proceeds to move to the drawn-up numpad with 0 to 9 and quickly directed the glass across 6 figures, starting with 4, 3, then so on, meaning it was over 400,000 years old.
Me and my friend then asked the entity a series of ridiculous and to us fascinating questions at the time, some personal, some scientific, etc. It was all well and good. The communication was impressive to me. The glass moved with a sharp and clear intent for each answer, like someone grabbed the base of the upside-down glass and swiftly moved it to each letter, sometimes spelling words so fast we couldn't keep up and lost some meaning. But I wanted something more. Can you show us a visual sign? Yes. I didn't want anything happening inside in my room, so I asked, "Can you show us outside if we go out on the balcony?" Yes. Should we go outside now? No. We asked some more questions unrelated, and after about 5 minutes or so, I asked again, "Is it time for us to go outside now?" Yes. Me and my friend stood up and went out to the balcony in a, "all right, don't know what to expect, but here we go" type attitude. It was almost bright outside. The time was 4 a.m., mid-August. The streetlights were off, but it was still early dawn. From our vantage point of a second-floor apartment, we notice what we first thought was a rock behind a small shed across the road, to the right of the resident parking lot. We then realize that it's a black cat. It sat, mesmerized by something behind the shed, out of our view. It then moves to the left, our eyes following, until it's straight ahead of us. Just as it lays down under one of the cars, a white orb of light appears, about 6 feet above the ground. It appeared out of nowhere. The orb itself was about the size of a basketball. The light was solid and pure. It was white but did not reflect. It wasn't bright in the sense that it was fuzzy. It was bright like it was a puncture of matter space-time. It made a quick floating swoosh and was gone, just as quickly. When it was gone, I looked at my friend to my left, and he looked at me, stunned, with his mouth open, literally. We look towards the same spot again, and it almost instantly appears again, like a confirmation that we did indeed see what we saw. This time, it performed a longer swoosh or swing and came from the right. We stay amazed for about 10 minutes, then went back inside. Was the orb of light the sign? I asked. Yes. It was never really scary. It was just a feeling of wonder. The last time I did it was in 2014. Never seen anything like that orb again, though.